The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most enduring and complex conflicts in the world. At its heart, a dispute over a small strip of land on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, his land sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, has been a site of conflict and coexistence for millennia. For Jews, the biblical land of Israel, the site of their ancient kingdoms and the holiest city of Jerusalem, Christians revere it as the Holy Land where Jesus lived, died, and was resurrected. Muslims hold Jerusalem as their third holiest city, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the iconic Dome of the Rock. This shared religious significance has made the land a focal point for pilgrimage, conquest, and conflict for centuries. Control of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas has changed hands numerous times throughout history, from the ancient Israelites and Romans to the Byzantine Empire, the early Muslim conquest, and the Crusades. The land bears the imprint of empires and faiths that have risen and fallen. This long and turbulent story has left an indelible mark on the regions, shaping the identities and narratives of the people who call it home. The modern-day conflict, however, is rooted in more recent historical events. The late 19th century saw the rise of Zionism, a political movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. This movement gained momentum in response to growing anti-Semitism in Europe, particularly in the wake of the Dreyfus Affair and pilgrims in Russia. Jews facing persecution and discrimination sought as safe haven and returned to their ancestral homeland. At the same time, the land was primarily inhabited by Palestinian Arabs who had their own deep-rooted connections to the land. They had their own history, culture, and way of life, intricately woven into the fabric of the region. The stage was set for a clash of national aspirations, with both sides claiming the same land as their own. The convergence of these historical forces, the intertwined claims to the land, and the emergence of competing national movements created a volatile mix. The struggle for control and self-determination in this small but deeply symbolic land would soon erupt into one of the most intractable conflicts of the 20th and 21st centuries. World War brought about seismic shifts in the global order, redrawing the map of the Middle East and setting this stage for decades of conflict. Following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which had controlled Palestine for centuries, Great Britain gained control of the territory under a mandate from the League of Nations. The British Mandate for Palestine, established in 1922, was tasked with administering the region and preparing it for eventual independence. However, the British faced the daunting task of balancing the competing demands of the Jewish and Arab populations. The Balfour Declaration of 1970, a letter from British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Zionist leader Lord Rothschild, had already declared British establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This declaration, while vague in its language, was seen by Zionists as a promise of a Jewish state and fueled Jewish immigration to Palestine. The influx of Jewish immigrants, however, heightened tensions with the Arab population. Palestinians, who made up the majority of the population, viewed the increasing Jewish presence as a threat to their own aspirations for self-determination. They resented British rule and the perceived favoritism shown towards Jewish immigration and land purchases. As Jewish immigration increased, so too did Arab opposition, culminating in violent outbreaks and riots throughout the 1920s and 30s, since the aftermath of World War II and the Holocaust, which underscored the plight of European Jews and the urgent need for a Jewish homeland. The international pressure mounted for a solution to the Palestinian question in 1947, recognizing the intractability of the conflict. Great Britain referred the issue to the newly formed United Nations. The UN proposed a partition plan, dividing Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem designated as an international zone. This plan, adopted by the UN General Assembly in Resolution I-81, was accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Arab leaders. They argued that it was unjust to create a Jewish state on land that was predominantly Arab. The partition plan, intended to resolve the conflict, instead ignited it, with the British withdrawal date looming and no agreement in sight. The stage was set for a bloody conflict. The fragile peace collapsed and the region plunged into war, marking a turning point in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and forever altering the destiny of both peoples. On May 14, 1948, as the British Mandate for Palestine expired, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the independence of the State of Israel. This declaration, a watershed moment in Jewish history, marked the fulfillment of a long-held Zionist dream, the creation of a Jewish state in their ancient homeland. However, this victory for Israel came at a heavy price for Palestinians. The declaration of Israeli independence triggered an immediate response from neighboring Arab states, who declared war on the newly formed state. The ensuing conflict, known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, or Thiwa, Rof independence in Israel, witnessed fierce fighting between Israeli forces and the armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. The war resulted in a decisive Israeli victory, expanding the territory under Israeli control beyond the borders outlined in the UN partition plan for Palestinians. The war had catastrophic consequences. During the fighting, an estimated 700 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes, becoming refugees in neighboring countries. This mass displacement, known as the Nakba, Arabic for catastrophe, faced a deeply traumatic event in Palestinian history. It led to the creation of a large and dispersed Palestinian diaspora, scattered across refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and beyond. The 1948 war had profound and lasting implications for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It resulted in the establishment of the State of Israel, but it also created a Palestinian refugee problem that remains unresolved to this day. It embedded a deep sense of loss and injustice among Palestinians who were displaced from their homes and denied the opportunity to create a state of their own. The war also solidified the cycle of violence and mistrust that would characterize the conflict for decades to come. The 1948 war was not just a military victory for Israel, but also a defining moment in its national consciousness. It shaped the country's security policies and its perception of the Arab world. The war also left scars on the Palestinian psyche, shaping their narrative of dispossession and their struggle for self-determination. The events of 1948 continue to cast a long shadow over the conflict, serving as a reminder of the unresolved issues and the need